All right, so Andy, are you about ready to get started?
I'm ready whenever you all are ready.
All right, so I want to begin by welcoming all of you to our Teaching and Learning Center Professional Development Series every Wednesday at noon, same bat time, same bat channel, same Zoom link. And this week, and by the way, I'm Don Sauce here. I'm the Associate Director of the Teaching and Learning Center. This week, we are so lucky to have Andy Thompson come in and sharing some time with us. Andy is the Director of the Office of Student Life. We've been jokingly referring to this as the COVID office, because if you've had a student who has gone into isolation or quarantine a little bit, you've probably heard from his office recently. They do lots and lots of things, and what they help us do is service our students the way they should be serviced. And he's going to talk about how we've made a promise of support to our students, and Andy is one of the people on our campus that helps us follow through on that promise. So with no further ado, I'm so excited that we have a very relevant, timely, interesting, and fascinating conversation today with Andy Thompson.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, Don. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so that we can all kind of, are we seeing my PowerPoint there? Good. Awesome. I saw some head nods. So one thing, thanks for having me. I've gotten hooked into the Teaching Learning Center here for the last, I feel like, year and a half of doing presentations. I always enjoy the opportunity to come and have a discussion, and I do. Obviously, I have a set PowerPoint with some topic items, but I really do want this to be a discussion. And so since I'm sharing screen, I can only see a couple of your faces. So do not hesitate to jump in, ask questions, get clarity, offer insights. I certainly want this next 45 minutes to an hour together to be meaningful for all of us. And I am by no means an expert on this. I actually just came out this morning. The university is going through a review from the JED Foundation, which focuses on student mental health and well-being, and takes a comprehensive, it's a 4-year process, takes a comprehensive look at what we're doing as an institution across all channels, and that's student life, across all our academic units, about how we're supporting our students. And it's a really interesting kind of look at what we're doing, where we can improve, what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, as well as what our students are telling us we need to do better. So again, it was just a nice reminder that this is on everybody. And so let's have that open discussion and dialogue, okay? As Don said, my name is Andy Thompson. I'm Director of the Office of Student Life and Senior Associate Dean of Students. I've been in that role since mid-July, when Heather Reed, who was Director of the office for about 16 years, retired. But I've been in the Office of Student Life. This is my 7th year now, and 12 years at K-State. So without further ado, we're just going to go ahead and jump in here. Okay, so the mission of the Office of Student Life there is on the screen, but the way I like to describe it is we're just here to help students that might be going through some crappy things. And you can define crappy things as big or as little as you want. We know that in a student's time at K-State, whether that's a year or 7 years or 10 years, it's likely there's going to be some challenges along the way while they're a student here. And again, that could be something that's kind of a quick, easy absence verification process, all the way up to something that is one huge item that's really hit them hard, or it could be a series of 10 really little things. But as we know, death by paper cut, right? Like if you keep getting cut, that little cut in the same spot, that can become a wound that's really difficult to heal. And so we're here to help however help looks for that student. We like to say that we're an office that a student can start with if they don't know where to go, or they can end with if they feel like they've been everywhere and don't have good answers. And we're not going to say that we're going to have the perfect solution, but we certainly are going to make sure we've exhausted all of our options as we work with the student and try to figure out how we best support them. I forgot to give the caveat. I'm working from home today. My first grader is also working from home today. I've told her, don't interrupt me in the next hour, but if she pops in and needs some assistance, we'll just kind of address that as we go. But she's usually pretty good about being self-sufficient. On the screen there is just some facts about the Office of Student Life that I think are kind of important for contextual purposes in our conversation. You know, last year we worked with about 3,800 student contacts. That's students that had some sort of action with our office. So, you know, it may be an absence verification where it just came straight through our front desk. A dean didn't necessarily meet with that student. Kind of straightforward. Grandma passed away and they had to attend the funeral. We got the obituary and we send that out all the way up to those students that we work with throughout the semester on really complicated issues. That student of concern number, I think, is a really important thing to try to understand, because I think that provides a lot of what our office really does, and I think what our office really stands out for doing. Last year, we worked with 1,473 student of concerns. So let me define that for you. We define a student of concern as somebody that gets put on our radar. So a faculty member sends us an email or fills out a student of concern report that says, this student hasn't attended classes in 2 weeks. They're not responsive to my email. They failed the tests. They told me that they struggle with mental health. Somebody gets that person on our radar. That means we are proactively as an office reaching out to that student to have a conversation to try to help them and help support them. Again, that's 1,400 of those last year. That's up by nearly 800 reports from the year before. And that was up from about 200 reports from the year before that. Now, I don't see the growth in that number as oh my gosh, we have a huge issue on campus. I see it as we've got a campus that's actually paying attention and recognizing what mental health means, recognizing that smaller concerns can grow into bigger concerns. And so I think that, I see the question in the chat, so that's perfect. But I think that just means people are paying attention, and so I think that's good. The question in the chat is how many of those happened after classes moved online. I will say that going online, as well as the new, and we're in the middle of this right now, the new progress report process that we asked faculty to fill out, also up those numbers a little bit. What I don't want to downplay too much is that just last fall alone, so prior to going online, prior to the SSC Navigate process, we had more student of concerns last fall than we had the entire academic year the year before. So we certainly were seeing a higher number already. I will tell you, if you took the online piece out of the equation, Melissa, we probably were going to see that number break 1,000 anyway. We were at almost 700 just in the fall. In the previous year to that, we were at like 497 or something like that, give or take a few. I put where we stand right now. So last year at this time, we had about 187 SOCs reported in the same time frame. So first day of school to midweek, week 7. Now we're about 172. So we're down a little bit from last year. But as Carolyn, who's our coordinator oversees this, reminded me, we had a student suicide last year at this point, where we had a big outreach of student of concerns on that. So I think we're actually trending upward in that category this year. And again, last fall was our biggest fall ever. So the fact that we're kind of in the same trajectory is, I don't know how to take that. Just means we've got a lot of students that need some support, and that's okay. Questions so far on those numbers? I want to make sure that I don't just blow through here. All right. So in our office, we've got 4 professional staff members, myself, Dean Laurel Moody, and Dean Justin Frederick. And we divide our workload by academic college. So we try to become specialists for an academic college so we can understand what it means when a student's in human body and what kind of commitment that is, or when they're in anatomy, physiology, or the specific requirements for our education students when they're heading through their blocks. And so when a student sits down with us and says, I'm in block A, as a dean, I understand what that means, that they're in block A. Carolyn Jones, you can see on the screen, she is our coordinator in the office. And that is a title that doesn't fully describe what Carolyn means to our office. So she oversees the student of concern process. So any of those reports that come in, Carolyn is putting her eyeballs on, and she's the one that's doing the initial outreach and making sure that that student's getting that connection point. So it certainly is a critical and vital role to what's going on within the office. Additionally, in the office, we do have Sarah Barr, who is, our students, they pay a part of their fee, pays for access to Sarah Barr. So if you have students at all that have legal trouble, so maybe they get a minor in possession while down in Aggieville, they're having a tricky time with a citation they got in a traffic accident, they're having issues with their landlord. Sarah oversees our off-campus housing support, and so students can come in and meet with her and for free have a conversation with her, get legal advice. She may go down to the courthouse and help represent them. She can talk through what a diversion process may look like. So a student shouldn't run off and hire a private attorney for thousands of dollars, because they very well could be resolved for free with Sarah. Couple circumstances where Sarah can't be used. If it's a student against another student, she can't represent. If the student is upset with the university and wants to try to do something against the university, she obviously can't do that because of conflict of interest, and she's paid by the university. And then really like bigger charges. But I always recommend a student starts with Sarah because she can make recommendations of someone locally that might be able to help that student out. So just some items to keep in mind today to kind of frame our discussion as we move forward about how we support our students. That first one, life happens, and usually at the worst times. It would be really convenient if we could somehow get a syllabus of what our year is going to look like that says, hey, in March, there's going to be this pandemic that forces us all home, where you may or may not have good internet, but you're expected to be in online classes the rest of the semester. Or you're going to get really sick and have to miss 2 weeks of classes. Or your grandma's going to pass away, or you're going to be in a car accident, or you're going to be in a bike accident and be hospitalized for 2 weeks. Right, that's ridiculous. We're never going to have that. But we have to understand that life is going to happen, and it's always at an inconvenient time, because it's never convenient to face a crisis. And I think as we talk about working with students, and I also want to challenge us to think it's not just about how we're working with students. I think one of the best things that's come out of this pandemic is the realization of, hey, Andy's got kids and he's working from home and trying to be a dad while trying to be a dean, while trying to be a spouse. To understand that Don's dealing with things and Tucker's dealing with things and Melissa's dealing with things. That's the names I see on my screen. And that's okay. And I think the more grace we can give one another, the better served we are as a community at K-State and across the country. I think we got to remember to meet the student where they are. So, as I said at the beginning, college is really hard. And every student comes in with a different skill set and a different level of ability to cope with stressors and struggles. And just because you, when you were a student, had it together and could handle all these things, and maybe you were president of 4 student organizations and you took 18 hours and you're a 4.0 student, doesn't mean that that's where every student is. And I think understanding that every circumstance is a little different is just really important. And I understand that some of you teach classes that have 300 people. And so I need you to also know that I have no expectation that you know all 300 of your students and all their circumstances. But what I do hope is that you keep in the back of your mind that all 300 of those students have different circumstances and have varying levels of abilities to deal with those circumstances, and how you respond to helping that student has a huge impact on their success, not only this semester, but in future semesters. Grace and understanding go a long way. When I'm having when I'm having kind of a not awesome moment, and those usually come from maybe a student's reach out to a professor and professor says, I'm sorry your dad passed away, but you still are going to get a 0 on that quiz that you missed. You know, I say in my office, I think karma will come back to get that person, which is just a really awful way to think about life, right? But it comes from a place of, I want to challenge all of us, when you're going through that really crappy moment, when you're having that really crappy struggle, how do you want other people to respond to that? I would hope that if you are having a really down moment or facing some adversity, or no matter how big or small, that if you went to your department head, your colleague, your friend, and said, this is what's going on, that the response would be, I'm sorry to hear that, how can I help? And that's all I ask. And I'm not saying that we help in a way that students are, and I see the chat going here, so I'm going to get off through the slide and I'm going to jump over to the chat so I'm not too distracted. But I do hope that we are giving grace and understanding and trying to just be there for one another as a community the best we can. Recognizing that doesn't always mean 100% fulfillment of a missed assignment, right? Like sometimes that's making adjustments as best we can. I pick on Human Body just because I think it's, one, they're super supportive, but two, you have a cadaver, and sometimes if you miss the lab on the cadaver, it's hard to make that up until the next semester, right? I get it. The Office of Student Life gets that, but if we can think outside the box, how can we do that? Number 4, students are in more than just your class. When I talk to a student, I always say to them, if you've missed 2 weeks, college is really hard to just do, and it's really hard to catch up. It's really difficult to do what you normally need to do, plus do the catch up at the same time. And so as you're talking, as a student's talking with you, that student is in your class, plus sometimes 5 to 6 other courses. And so I think I tell a student, you may talk to one professor and the plan seems doable, and the second professor, it seems doable. The third professor, now all of a sudden, whew, that's getting tricky. And by the 4th and 5th one, they just don't know how they can dig out. And so I think as you're working with students, I think just keep in mind that there's a lot of classes, and we haven't even talked about student orgs. We haven't talked about the fact that they've missed 2 weeks because of something going on, and maybe there's still some effect from that. And the fact that they may be working jobs. So there's just a lot going on there. Think outside the box. Again, one of my favorite phone calls to get is from a faculty member who just got a letter from me. I absolutely love it because it does 2 things. 1, we usually end up coming up with a creative solution. And 2, it gives me more context so I can better serve the student and in turn the faculty member down the road. And so if there are creative solutions, I certainly want to have those discussions and encourage those solutions. And then pay attention. So much what we're going to talk about today builds on established relationships and paying attention to kind of normalized behaviors. And when that normalization gets off track a little bit in how we identify that. Before I click over, well, actually, I'll read the chat here. I've got a video I'm going to play. And so I'm going to slide this over to this screen. And then I've got to, I'm not sure that I shared with sound. So let me stop my share really quick.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So I share that video because I think for me, it's just kind of my own personal philosophy, right? Like we all know things are going to happen in our life, and things are going to happen to people we care about, and things are going to happen to people we don't actually care that much about, but we have a relationship with anyway. And I think if we operate from a place of empathy and grace, we're going to figure out a really positive way to interact as a community and to help uplift each other as a community to find a path forward. I also want to say, we have to understand what a student is defining as success and what a student is needing in their journey. Not every student comes to your class hopeful to get the 100% A. Not every student, some students are just trying to just get by. Some students would love to get an A, but their life circumstance doesn't allow it because they're just dealing with so much. They're just here to get by and get that degree, and that's okay. But I think understanding that that's where they're at is really, really important. And so I think that's just I play that empathy and sympathy video because if we can all give each other that grace and understanding and have an empathetic approach, I think we're going to find a way forward. I was reading through the chat during that video, and a couple things I wanted to touch on. One, we're talking about the communication here in the chat, and I like what Melissa just shared about it's, that it does happen. It just we all got to figure out how it happens. If there's a student in crisis, sometimes checking their email is really difficult, right? Now, there's an expectation that if they want some help, they've got to be able to communicate it and work with you there. But I think having some understanding that may be something that that's part of the issue. That may be one of your clues, right? That's on the screen here about how to recognize a student in crisis. I also think what came up in the chat that I can't echo loudly enough is normalizing help. I think sharing some of your own vulnerabilities and when you maybe struggled. I know for me, in conversations with students, I do that quite a bit to normalize. One really simple low-level example is when I talk to a student about withdrawing from a class and getting the W. And students don't understand that a W is not that big a deal because it doesn't hit your GPA. And if you have 1 or 2 along the way, it's not a huge deal. I had 4. One because the class just kind of got me, and I was like, nope. And another because I had a semester with mono and just had to get rid of classes. And so I think normalizing that help, normalizing that things happen is really important. On the screen here, and you can see the asterisk at the bottom, that's actually direct from Carolyn, our coordinating office. Crises aren't always loud. I think it's easy to identify those things that are really in your face. It's difficult to identify students that are just starting. just kind of starting the slide downhill. And I think that's where we talk about how do you recognize that student, and where I talk about building upon your previous relationships. You know, and I've had this up here for a while, so hopefully you've read through that. But, you know, I'll say, let's talk about appearance, right? So students started here and they were showered and well-dressed, and now they're showing up really unkempt. Have not just the freshman beard, but they're just not shaving, they're not taking care of themselves, right? Like, not just going from, okay, well, now it's pajama season on the college campus, to that they really, truly just aren't taking care of themselves. Like that could be a physical clue. I think, how are they doing on their tests? Did they go from scoring 80, 90, 100s on discussion boards and tests and quizzes to all of a sudden it's tailed off? They're not doing it all. They're turning their work in late. Like, all of those things are really are part of the total picture. So when I talk about relationships, it's, do you have an established one like this, or is it just really a paper relationship? Well, then pay attention to the scores. Pay attention to when they're coming in, how well they're doing. You know, I think as you notice those things, you know, how do you relate those observations? How do you normalize struggle? How do you, at the start of a class, when you're talking through your syllabus and you're hitting on, hey, if you're struggling, here's how you get an absence verification through student life. If you need an accommodation, here's Student Access Center. If you're struggling, come talk to me, and do it in a genuine and responsive way that a student knows, like, hey, you know what, I can go talk to this professor. And then when you hear it, be responsive to help getting them the help they need, or to make some adjustments. I think that's where, as a campus, we're going to get to a better space, that when a student reaches out, even if you're not comfortable, you at least know where to get that student pointed to help get them the help they need. So we talk about the referrals there, whether that's your dean's office, your department head, office of student life, counseling services, family center, if they live in housing and dining. You know, there's lots of resources to try to connect with. It doesn't hurt to reach out. It doesn't hurt for you to pick up the phone and call the Office of Student Life and say, hey, I don't know if this is a student of concern or not. No matter how small it is, get it to us. No matter how small your concern is, or if you're like, I don't know if that student's struggling, you can't go wrong by reaching out to a student and saying, hey, I'm here for you. I see what's going on. Is there something I can do to help out, or someone I can get you connected with? That's never going to put us in a bad place. I think that last bullet, and it's just one bullet about assisting a student in crisis, but taking care of yourself is so critically important. Every meeting I'm in that we talk about student well-being, I mention our faculty and staff well-being. And hopefully you all saw this week the KSA Today about faculty and staff and being able to utilize some of our counseling services. I think that if we aren't as healthy as we can be, so all the things I tell my students to do, or the students to do, we need to be doing as faculty and staff members as well. And so if we aren't doing that for ourselves, then we can't serve our student population as well as we can. And so I do challenge all of us to do that. You know, one of the things I say to students, you know, if I said the word selfish to you all, I would bet 90% of you would say being selfish is a negative thing, right? Or have a negative connotation. I say to my students all the time, we have to be selfish with our own mental health and our own well-being, right? And I use that 100% in a positive context, because if we are selfish in our own mental health and physical well-being, then that to me means you're taking care of yourself, which then allows you to take care of others, right? Like, it's okay to say no if that's not going to be healthy for you, right? If a student's involved in 10 organizations at 10% capacity, that's not great, right? But if they can back it down to 1 or 2 or 3 and be there more fully and allow themselves time to sleep and to do their homework and do all these things, then we're going to be in a much better place as a university and when we're talking about it. So I think selfish in our own mental health, our own physical well-being, and And the grace and the understanding and the empathy is going to help get us there. So what are some of the actual tangible things you can do when you see a student that might be struggling? So we've talked about the student of concern process. It is really, really easy. You fill out a form online. I mean, for those of you that have done it, I think to do that form takes less than a minute, depending on how much you type in the description. I mean, you can attach things there. You can copy and paste emails in there, however you want to do it. You can call us. If you have questions about anything, there's a student of concern guide. So if you're not quite ready to do student of concern, there are tips and tricks out there about how you can engage with students, what resources are available. What are we going to do when we receive a student of concern? So for those of you that have done it, you may notice that we ask you to kind of rank. Is this a low, intermediate, or high level concern? And that's your ranking. Like, we're not, there's nothing super scientific to it. But what that does on our end, Carolyn, our coordinator, gets every single student of concern via email, okay? The dean on call in the office, because there's always one of us on call, also receives all low and intermediate. And so that's just to make sure that we're getting eyeballs on it after hours. Obviously, if it's 2 in the morning, we're not looking at it. But on high ones, every single person in our office gets those. So we all can take a look at it. We all can see what's going on. And you may have marked it as high, but it's not really clicking as a high student of concern for us. That's fine. We'll still take it through our regular process. But depending on what that looks like, so low, intermediate, that student's going to get an email usually within 24 hours from Carolyn. If it's a high concern, it's going to happen that same day. It may end up in a phone call. If there's health and safety, you're probably going to want to follow back up with a phone call to us. You may be needing to call the police, or if you call us, we may call the police. Just kind of depends. But we're going to do an initial outreach to that student. On those low and intermediate, if it's been a day or two, we haven't heard back. The nice thing with our system, we can tell when a student opens an email. So our student of concern emails include a list of resources. A low concern, we know a student's read it. We've connected them with resources. That may be the end of our outreach. On some of those elevated ones, then the next step is we're going to call them. And we're going to try to reach back to you as a reporter. If we meet with them, if I meet with them and have an update, or if we can't get a hold of them, we may reach back and say, hey, have they been to your class? Has this resolved itself out? Like, we may try to close that loop a little bit. The end of the day, if you have a question about a report or a student that you've submitted to us, just call us, shoot us an email. We are happily going to give you an update about where we stand in the process. Could be that the student did call us, they've got an appointment, but it's, they're not coming in until Friday. And so there's not quite an update for you, but just knowing that they have an appointment hopefully is comforting to you. This is just a screenshot of our student concern report to show that it's a pretty easy form. This is another screenshot here of our student of concern guide. And so you can see it's kind of broken down by topics with different who you can contact, what kind of issues there are. It's a pretty extensive document there on our website that you could check out. So I do want to touch on abstinence verification because for some of you that overheard Don and I talking before the meeting, we do have a new excused absence policy, which K-State never had before. And I want to take a look here at the chat. Yeah, so it's the how do you communicate to a student that maybe you've submitted a report on? Don't want to feel like I'm reporting to them. So on our form, we do have a question that says something along the lines of, do you want the student to know you submitted it? And it's yes, no, if you have to. So I very firmly stand in the category of we are doing this and you are doing this to help the student. And so if that student has come to you and said, hey, this is what's going on for me, I think and you're going to submit that as a student concern, I think it's 100% appropriate to say to that student, hey, we want to get you connected. No, it's not just my class that this might be impacted by. Let's get you connected with the Office of Student Life so that they can help communicate to all your faculty about that. We do get reports where a faculty member says, don't tell the student. And we will do our absolute best not to. Now, if you're the only one that knows about it, student might put two and two together. We always take it from that. This person came to us out of a point of care and concern, and 99% of the time, the student appreciates that, is happy that that's occurred, and happy that they've been able to have that connection and that resource connection. So I think it kind of, in reporting is probably a tricky word, right? Like, I'm not sure what word we could make it sound a little better, but like information sharing, resource connecting, whatever that looks like. But yeah, it's not being wrong, and they're not in trouble. And I think we try to mirror that too. So I think that's a good question in the chat. I'm happy to talk further about that if anybody wants to put that in the chat or open up here and have a discussion. So the absence verification process, I'm guessing some of you have gotten an email from us this semester. Just based on numbers I'm going to show here in a little bit. So there is a new excused absence policy. Like I said, we had never had one before. There had been some, pregnancy related things that we had to do some excused absences on, but now we've got many more items that are covered. And so if you haven't read that excused absence, I think it's really important. If a student has an absence verification that falls under military service, court appearances, pregnancy, childbirth, adoption, religious observances, those are things that the Office of Student Life will work to verify and get those out to you all. And you will notice there's some changes in our language in our letters where it's going to talk about this is an excuse policy, and here's the policy that points to it. There are then letters you'll get to us that we call verified letters, because there are certain things that don't actually sit as an excused absence. I'm going to use funerals as an example. A funeral for a family member is not actually an excused absence in the absence policy. It still allows professor discretion. Now, we are still sending quite a few of those because we will still happily collect the obituary and email out to faculty to say, hey, we can verify the student is attending a funeral for the next 3 days for their grandmother. Again, still up to a faculty member on how they want to work with that student. Of course, we come from the more you can work with them, the better, in our opinion, understanding that's not always the case. But I think if you get an excuse, that's something you've really got to work with the student on. If you get a verified, we hope that you'll work with the student on, okay? That's just an online submission process. There's just a link on our website that a student can fill out to do that. I'm just reading that chat, okay. The COVID process, and this is kind of a hot topic. We aren't just the COVID office, but some days it feels that way. Obviously, we've got the working with students that are in quarantine and isolation. So we're sending those letters out as we get notified by Lafine, as well as off-campus providers and students sending stuff in. Under guidance of the provost, those are circumstances that we really want to be working with students on. Again, that flexibility and understanding. I just want to show some stats really quick. Last year, we sent just under 1,100 memos to faculty and staff. That's the, hey, work with the student sort of stuff. That reached 5,200 faculty. Now, Don, maybe got 100 emails. Right? So Don counts as 100 in this number, right? It's not individual faculty. Thus far, up to 10:30 this morning, we've sent 2,800 memos this year to 17,000 faculty touch points. So to say that COVID has had an impact, and you can see only 105 of those were our traditional absence verification. So to say we're the COVID office right now is probably pretty accurate, because it seems to be taking up our time a little bit. I share that just to understand kind of the reach, and I think all of you understand the reach. We're sending a lot of emails out about our COVID process that's going on for students. I'm just reading the question here about student athletes. Do you know protocol for student athletes? In other words, if an athlete is a student of concern, do you recommend submitting? I think, I recommend a student concern for no matter what the population is. Something that we'll do is if we know they're in a population that maybe has other support mechanisms, we will certainly reach out and work with our partners in those areas. And so if you've got a student, no matter what population they're in, you can submit a student concern and we'll work on that. Yeah, thanks Tucker for the shout out. Yeah, we're doing that. We were unable to fill my position in the Office of Student Life as I slid into Heather's position. So we're down a dean currently. Official reporting, obviously institutional equity, if we have a student that has faced issues around Title IX, Office of Student Life. And then I put the website, the ksu.edu/report, because that's really our best centralized place to land to grab all of our reporting mechanisms. So if a student has faced discrimination or harassment, sexual violence, there's a code of conduct, student of concern, any of those reports are going to live on that website. And then obviously our care office, the fantastic work that they do as a confidential resource for students that are facing anything around dating, domestic violence, sexual harassment, sexual violence, and stalking. The care office is going to be a place to send students so that they can work with those students and help the student be in control of the process. The resources I'm going to talk about are by no means exhaustive. We are very fortunate at K-State to have just an outstanding number of resources. Several of the resources fall underneath some of these categories, and so this is just kind of a quick hitter list of some resources to be aware of. Academic Achievement Center, so if a student needs tutoring, academic coaches, so if you're seeing a student that's struggling with time management, they could try to get an academic coach. Unbelievably good program, just in terms of what is available there for students to be able to talk through some like skill building to become a stronger student and find success here. Lafine Health Center, obviously a full medical center, women's clinic, physical therapy, counseling services there, pharmacy. They're really leading the charge on our COVID response and doing some great things. So of course, students can connect there. The academic success course, and I wanted to make sure to point this out because it's new this year. It's being piloted for first year students to, they have resources on Canvas, an unbelievable list of things that they can access. In Dr. Brown Leonard actually just in the JED meeting this morning reported that 95% of students had accessed that student success course with their resources this semester. I do know, or I hope there's discussion about expanding that access to all students at K-State. What a terrific resource that'd be to just have this landing page that's in a student's Canvas courses so when they're struggling, we can just point them in that direction of a list of resources to connect to. Student Access Center, obviously you have students that need accommodations, that's on the syllabus. I think most people know about that office. I think one of the things that's really key is, for our students that maybe have temporary disabilities, that maybe haven't had to utilize those services throughout their educational opportunities, to make sure that they understand that's available. A student that breaks their dominant hand and needs a note taker, I think it's an office that's just great to connect to. Keep in mind as we point our students there. Financial assistance, college is just really, really difficult and expensive. And so they can come talk to us and we will certainly work with the student to try to explore what their resources are for their finances. I'll give an example. We were able to, as a university is the we I'm referring to, there was a small pot of money for students that needed technology help this semester. So needed a computer. I had a student that needed a printer. And academic advisors in the Office of Student Life, if a student was connected with us, it was a really quick form. I had personally 5 different students that got brand new laptops within 24 hours because they couldn't afford it and we had access to these funds. It wasn't a huge pot of money, so a student had to be referred. But again, because those students got referred, we were able to get connected and get them laptops to find more success. And so I think getting them in, even if we don't have a clean answer, we can at least explore what that looks like. Care we've talked about. I think something to kind of make sure that we're all aware of is the change at counseling services that happened last year, that students get 8 free sessions a semester. That's a significant change from 4 free sessions for a fiscal year to 8 a semester. That's incredible in terms of what kind of support we can give our students on the mental health front. Obviously, the Family Center is an unbelievable partner as well on campus. Counseling services moving towards the teletherapy model has helped with our wait lists concern that we usually face. So we're able to get students in more quickly there. But the meeting I was just in this morning for JED, students still very much have the perception they can't get in to seek mental health treatment. And so that's a narrative we've got to change on campus and be more proactive in that. Nope, if you need it, go get it, and it's there and available, and as well as that shift in how many sessions they can have. Legal services we touched on. PowerCat Financial, again, they don't have funds, but they're a skill building. And I think it's so critically important that we are building the skills of our students so that these issues don't persist. If we can try to address budgeting issues and can try to help a student understand what it means to take out an unsubsidized versus a subsidized loan versus one that's through the federal government versus one that's through a private lender, what does that actually mean? I think that's really important. And then Cats Cupboard, we know we have some food insecurity. The creation of Cats Cupboard a couple of years ago serves our campus really well. And unfortunately, we still have food insecurity on campus, but knowing that resource is available and the expertise that they have about what's also available in the community is a really important one to. And just to wrap up here and then give some time for questions, I just wanted to put back up that list of what we talked about at the beginning, and just as that reminder that life happens usually at the worst time, meeting our students where they are. I think there's been some good discussion in our chat here about, some students are going to be very private about their concerns and look at a student of concern as being reported and getting in trouble. Other students are going to feel differently about that. I think one thing that, I learned a lot in grad school, but one thing that stands out to me in grad school, I had a professor, Dr. Jerry Neal, and Dr. Neal drove home the point of meeting the student where they are in the context of, yes, maybe that student broke up with their boyfriend or girlfriend of 1 month and they are crushed and it is hurting them at a level 8 out of 10. And for you, in your moment, you're going, are you kidding me? Like an 8 out of 10 on the hurt scale? Like that's like a 1, because there are many fish in the sea. Move on, get over it. But if that's the greatest hurt that person has ever felt, then that is their 8 out of 10. Maybe they're 10 out of 10. And unfortunately, life is going to teach them that is really probably a 1 or 2, but we have to meet them at that 8 out of 10 level. And if we can remember that just because that hurt wouldn't be so much to us, it means a ton to them. And it's impacting them at that level. And if we keep that in mind, then I think we're going to find a way to serve them with grace and understanding and empathy to help them as a student move forward as they deal with that pain and that ouch. We have an opportunity as members of this K-State campus to teach people how to care and how to respond to people that are hurting. So when they're in that position to be able to present that grace and understanding and empathy, they do it in a way of, you know what, I had this awesome professor that really went out of their way to help me out. And I would really want us to sit in that camp of K-State helps, K-State doesn't hurt more or dig or keep the wound open longer. And again, I just think as we look through the rest of that list, think outside the box, pay attention to one another. Many of these points were in my presentation last year, but they ring so much louder now in the COVID time, in the pandemic, with the exhaustion that we're all facing being in the pandemic, with the isolation we're feeling, and how much more important it is for us to be even more connected, pay that much more attention to one another in these kind of disconnected times. So that's just a reminder of where we are. The Office of Student Life is open. We're rotating staff throughout the week to try to be COVID conscious, but we are open 8 to 5 with at least one dean there every day. And then Carolyn, by choice, is there every day. That's just a screenshot of our website. And at that point, I just want to turn it I will stop my screen share and just open it up to any discussions or rebuttals. I'm assuming
So
I
Andy,
nailed it.
you've kind of talked about this opportunity we have. I think it's an obligation that we have. What do you think are the biggest barriers for faculty and staff for reaching out to students? And if we identify those barriers, how can we overcome them?
You know, I think it comes down to, I mean, every faculty member is also dealing with their stuff, right? Like, and so if you teach a class of 250 and you're also kind of tackling the fact that you're also maybe homeschooling your children 3 days a week and having your own struggles, it's hard to care for another person in a genuine way when you aren't whole yourself. And so I think that it so critically comes down to, as a campus community, how are we supporting one another? How are we creating a space that people realize it's okay to reach out for help, and that it's okay to kind of be intrusive in the care of somebody else, to say, hey, I want to do this. And that's a huge, I mean, that's a huge like task to be like, oh, it's not weird for Don to send me an email and be like, hey, Andy, you seem really like off in that meeting. Is everything okay? Right? But if we kind of normalize that a little bit, and we normalize that with our students and normalize that as a campus community, then I think it'll become a better place where we fully support one another. And I think that JET initiative is a really great start for that, because it is being very, in a positive way, a very critical look at what we're doing across, you know, if education's doing this in a really great way, but this program's not, how do we kind of bring it up so we lift this group up? And I think we overcome barriers. One of the worst things that happens is when I encourage a student to talk to a faculty member and say, hey, just go have a conversation. And that faculty member just shuts it down. Because then it's a real struggle for a student to gear up to go talk to the other faculty member. So I always say to a student, go have the conversation. If that one doesn't go well, go to the next conversation, because it may go really well, right? And just understand that every faculty member is in a different place, and every class is in a different place, and it might look differently. But I really hope we come out of this COVID time with this like grace and understanding that the provost has challenged us to, that continues outside of just COVID world.
Thank you. I completely agree.
I do want to thank all of you for coming and listening to me, kind of to just give you my thoughts on how we do this. I'm genuine when I say, whether it's in this environment or outside of this, if there's feedback, suggestions, ideas for how we can support our students in a better way, or you have questions, or if you ever get a letter from us and you're like, Andy, that doesn't match with what interactions I've had with the student, please call us, email us. Like, we very much want to have those conversations, because we just want to support our campus population as well as we can, and do it in a way that's meaningful for all of you as you also work with our student population.
So any additional comments for Andy or questions for Andy? All right, well, please join me in thanking Andy for giving us a wonderful conversation today. It was very important, and I think this is something that we're all struggling with, and Andy's absolutely right. We have a lot of things going on ourselves, which sometimes make it harder for us to be there for our students. Next week, and I've just dropped the information for the chat, our professional development series will continue along this vein. We'll have another Need to Know event by Jason Maysberg Tomlinson for accommodating students and providing access for all during COVID-19. Our theme for this year is caring, connection, and community for our entire professional development series. And we're going to continue along that way of trying to find the best ways that we can to provide promotion of our students' success and achievement during very challenging and trying times. So Andy did a wonderful job with this next week. Jason's going to do a wonderful job with it next week. And thank you so much for taking some time out of your week for us.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.